Yes, absolutely. This is very important. Of course, there are varieties of ex-Muslims. Some courageous ex-Muslims, such as Ibn Warraq, Noni Darwish, Wafa Sultan, have done very important work and continue to do so. Other ex-Muslims retain so much of their Islamic attitudes that they maintain a hostility toward other non-Muslim groups, and even to critics of Islam who have never been Muslims. Like I include in this group Ali Rizvi, Abdullah Samir, people like that. They're not really any use. They're more useful to the jihadis than they are to non-Muslims. But there is a growing awareness among ex-Muslims. I mean, there is a growing movement of ex-Muslims, many of whom are doing excellent work to challenge and criticize the beliefs and assumptions of Muslims. And this is very important because, for example, the non-Muslim governments of the world, many of them are placing great hope on de-radicalization programs. And these are based on the idea that Islam is a religion of peace. And they will teach
Yes.
jihadis. You know, it's ridiculous. They'll teach the jihadis the true peaceful Quran, and then everything will be okay. And of course, the jihadis laugh at this because they know what's in the Quran and they know it's not peaceful. And they know this whole thing is a charade. The governments of the world do not have the courage to actually try to disabuse the jihadis of their Islamic beliefs altogether. But that is the real effective way to make a jihadi not a jihadi. Even Musa Sarantonio the other day, an Australian non-Muslim who became a Muslim, became an ISIS leader. And he left Islam now. He realizes, he said, the Quran is plagiarized. What if our governments were telling jihadis that they're trying to de-radicalize, that the Quran is plagiarized, that the Quran is full of non-Arabic words, that the Quran it doesn't make any sense in many places, that the Quran is all these other things that are true about it, then that would stop the jihadis. And so, yes, the ex-Muslim movement is very important insofar as the ex-Muslims are not just backhanded apologists for Islam.
If I may push in my one last question for you, Robert, here it would be driven by one particular fact, that our freedom of speech and freedom of inquiry is being curtailed. Islamophobia bill is one such example. We now know their true intent. They want to shut us up. You can't question anything. It will be termed as propaganda and incitement. And then we need to go through an education process to rehabilitate us, How do we contest that in our political system, which is very important? Because if we can't demand reciprocity, then nothing is going to happen. We are way too humble. One of the things is that they are radicalized already. We are pumping money into de-radicalization and they laugh at us. You rightly said so. So the question here again is, if we are able to break down the entire process into social, economic, politics, and driven by technology, where do we need to make our first push? If I may say, prioritizing, where do we need to do that? They are clearly using our system against us.
Oh, yeah. And so we need to press their own contradictions, because in the first place, it's not a fair fight. And they are trying to shut us up. And so we can be as reasonable as the day is long and be as fact-based and have all the information on our side. It's not going to make any difference because they are not playing on a rational playing field. However, if we press their contradictions, then their hypocrisy starts to become clear. And then their whole house of cards is vulnerable. For example, they claim to be feminists and that they care for women's rights, and yet one of the most oppressive systems for women in the world, if not the most oppressive, is Islam. And so I have told young people on college campuses, have a Women's Rights Day and talk about the plight of women oppressed in Islam and women who've been brutalized, beaten up, or killed for not wanting to wear hijab, and so on. And the more we do that and show up their hypocrisy, the less they'll be able to claim a moral authority in shutting us up as Islamophobes and so on.
Okay, so I think time to move to the audience questions. There are quite a few, and let's move to the questions. Before that, I request everybody to please like this video, share it around as much as you can, and also to go to the description and subscribe to our Vimarsh channel, subscribe to us as well, and also support us and follow us. The links are all in the description. RP, Bharat needs an anti-jihad special operations force with 21st century equipment who can work day and night regardless of which political party is at the center.
Yeah, it does.
That's the Spanish solution, I guess.
Yes, you're quite right. Every country needs this, but this is what was prevented after 9/11. When George W. Bush on September 17th, 2001, went into the mosque in Washington, D.C. and said, Islam is peace, and undercut any connection between Islam and what had happened. This made it much more difficult, not just for the U.S., but for the governments of the world to deal with this problem realistically. And that's only gotten worse in the intervening 2 decades.
Okay. Next question will be asked by Vibhuti-ji.
Sonak Santra. Thank you, Sonak. Isn't compulsion to conform a facet of all Abrahamic faiths, including Christianity? Just like Islam, even Christianity believes in conversion, as we see in India. Can we not call that a jihad of sorts?
Well, you can call it whatever you want, I suppose, but there's a big difference. The difference is this. Let's say that a missionary comes to my door and says, convert. Well, and I say no. And then the missionary leaves. In Islam, if an Islamic dawah missionary comes to my door and says convert, and I say no, then he can kill me. Now, I am not talking about the controversies over forced conversion or bribery for conversion and so on in India. I repudiate all that. I have no support for any of that. But it's to compare it to Islam, I think, is out of focus because there is a big difference. Muhammad says, when you meet the unbelievers, this is a hadith, first, invite them to accept Islam. And so that's the same as the Christian missionaries. Second, if they refuse, invite them to pay the jizya, the tax that is specified in the Quran, chapter 9, verse 29, that the infidels have to pay into the Islamic treasury to reinforce the hegemony of Islam. And if they refuse to do that, then seek Allah's help and fight them. Those two, the second and the third parts of that, there's no correspondence to that in Christianity. So I don't see that you have the same kind of violence or the same kind of religious justification for the violence.
At least to the Christians, you can say, just say no.
Yes.
You can even tell them scram.
Scram. Sure.
Whereas in the Hidayah and as well as in the Fatawa Alamgiri, which the Jaipur Dialogues is translated into Hindi now.
Excellent.
It is very clear, says that, okay, that definition of jihad is the act of inviting the infidels to Islam and fighting them if they refuse.
There it is.
This is both in the Hidayah as well as in the Fatawa Alamgiri, identical. Okay, next question. VJ Reddy. Why does the non-Islamic West double down defending Islam despite so much terrorism, anti-Jewish and Christian, anti-women, and anti-gay ideology?
This is the result of the power of the left that has allied with the jihadis, and they have spread this propaganda about terrorism in the first place has nothing to do with Islam. Even Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and so many others have said this. Terrorism has nothing to do with Islam, and consequently, to talk about Islam in connection with terrorism is wrong, racist, and Islamophobic. And meanwhile, Muslims are the victims of racism, and so we need to give them special accommodation and special aid. And so this is the prevailing situation in the West, and it's because of an extremely skillful propaganda campaign.
Right. Next question by Vibhuti.
Okay, so we'll go alternate now. Good.
Yeah,
Next.
we'll go alternate now.
Jahangir Gotla, thank you, Jahangir, was wondering if Robert saw Kashmir Files and what impact this film may have made in the West. Also, I believe minority nonsense needs to go in India.
Where I live, there has not been a showing, and so I have not yet had an opportunity to see it. If it comes to this area, I will certainly see it. I've heard a great deal about it and published information about it on Jihad Watch. And a friend who has seen it has told me he's going to write a review, which I will publish at Jihad Watch as soon as he gets it to me. In the meantime, it's very important, everything that I know about it. Of course, I know about what happened in Kashmir and what it depicts. And this is something that most Americans have no idea about whatsoever. And this film needs very wide distribution, the widest possible distribution, in order to raise awareness about that. And like we've been saying, the awareness is all. It's the first step toward bringing about real change. And insofar as I have any kind of forum, I will do all I can to continue to raise awareness about this film.
Thank you.
Okay, next one. Gururaj Deshpande, thank you. Thank you for your support. Oneness. Robert, the West was seemingly giving Islamic fanaticism a tough fight post 9/11. Somewhere it got caught up with the colonial guilt for it to woo the Muslim community, so much that Muslims find the West to be a safe haven. What's with the West?
I wish I knew. The West is committing slow suicide. Maybe not so slow anymore, but I have to say, I don't really think that the West ever gave Islamic fanaticism a tough fight. What happened after 9/11 was that George W. Bush said that Islam had nothing to do with what happened. 6 days after, just as I said a few minutes ago. And that immediately hamstrung the U.S. government's ability to deal with this problem realistically. Then the U.S. invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. And there were numerous indications that were covered up for years and only have come out in the last few years that the high-level authorities in the Saudi government were involved in this. And the Islamic Republic of Iran, this is not well known, but it's well documented. The Islamic Republic of Iran helped the hijackers get into Afghanistan for training and get out of Afghanistan and back into the United States without being detected. And so the Islamic Republic of Iran and Saudi Arabia were the two states that were most involved with the attacks, and yet the United States invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. So the problem was wrongly dealt with from the beginning. And there was never any confrontation, there still has not been any confrontation by the U.S. of the motivating ideology behind the conflict. During World War II, the U.S. was very clear about what was Nazism and why we were fighting it, and what was the state Shinto ideology in Japan and why we were fighting it. But there's been no clarity at all whatsoever from the U.S. government about what jihad is and why they hit us on 9/11 and what we must do. They've never even admitted that this thing exists.
Okay. Next one.
Rahul Bhatia. Why US has no conversation to ban jihad ideology and separate it from Islam? Woke start in US and spread to other places. US adopts something, it has impact on the entire world. But you allowed Times Square, and I think he's referring to the Ramadan offerings in Times Square. Like we.
Yes, Well, that was inevitable, because once you have all the officials in the United States, all of them, saying Islam is benign, Islam is peace, Islam is therefore entirely welcome in the United States without any reservations of any kind, then it was only inevitable that we would see the scenes in Times Square that we saw Saturday, and we're going to see much more of it, and the blocking of traffic and everything else that we've seen in other countries for the prayers. Now, why has the U.S. had no conversation about separating the jihad ideology from Islam? Because of everything I've been saying, that Islam has nothing to do with the jihad, it's nothing to do with terrorism. This is what most American officials assume, because they've been so thoroughly propagandized for the last 20 years. And so we have Hillary Clinton saying a few years back, Islam is peaceful and tolerant, and Muslims have nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism, which is true of some Muslims, but not true of others. But you can't say that some Muslims have something to do with terrorism and that it's based on their Islamic beliefs. You can't say that in America. If you do, you'll be excoriated as a racist and an Islamophobe. And politicians, above all, don't want to have that kind of name attached to them. They know it'll be the end of their careers.
All right. Okay. Next question. Before that, I just have to remind people to go down to our description where our subscription plans are listed. Okay. The next question. Oneness again.
No.
Robert, do you think that the system of U.S. lobbying is the main reason for the socio-political rise of Islam? Are the U.S. lawmakers not shooting its citizens in the head?
Yes.
Greed not called out. Why?
There's pandemic corruption in the U.S. today. The politicians are the ones who are the greedy ones who are getting paid by these lobbies in various indirect ways. You know, you hear sometimes about various officials in the U.S. government getting $5 million. Like there's a controversy right now. Joe Biden is supposed to have gotten millions of dollars for his book that nobody read. He sold fewer books than anyone, and yet he got millions of dollars for his book. Well, obviously somebody was paying him for influence, and it was disguised. It was laundered as a book. And in the same way, many other politicians get $500,000 to speak somewhere, something like that. And really, it's money laundering for buying their allegiance to whatever cause. And the Islamic groups have done this very skillfully. They have unlimited money because of the oil connections, and so they have bought large portions of Washington and so many lawmakers of both parties. This is why they go around saying Islam is peace.
Okay, so Vibhuti can charge after he becomes a lawmaker because he's contesting an election for the New York State Assembly.
Yeah. Questions, freedom of speech.
Yeah, I know Jason. He does excellent work, and so that would be a wonderful discussion you would have with him.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll take your help in getting him on.
Sure, I can get you his address.
Good.
Yes.
Yes.
Poonam Abi. Thank you, Poonamji. How does Mr. Spencer address the issue of rapidly growing animosity and public call against Hindus in America and India, as evidenced by the California cases and the dismantling Hindutva-type events?
This is a function of the power of the Islamic groups in the United States. They have got millions of dollars from Arabia and from Qatar, and they use it for this kind of thing. You have the universities in the United States, Harvard, Georgetown, others, some of the most prestigious universities in the country, getting millions of dollars from Qatar and millions of dollars from Prince Al-Walid bin Talal in Saudi Arabia. The Georgetown University has the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding, which is just dawah, Islamic proselytizing, in a university format. And the same money has paid for this hostility against Hindus in American academia. Because, of course, you have Muslim Brotherhood groups that are financing America's universities.
Next question.
Disha Parekh. What can be done to release temples from the government control that would boost financial strength of Hindus? I think this is not the topic of discussion today, and we'll deal with it some other time. Sanatan Sarawa. Perplexed by the undeterred support that Muslim women provide, even though the book considers Muslim women to be material objects with lesser capability, how do we educate such women and bring them out of their troubles?
Many people are perplexed by this all over the world. And they think, why don't the Muslim women protest? But you have to imagine, if you're a Muslim woman, this is the context in which you live. The unbelievers are apes and pigs. They're animals. They have no wisdom. They don't have anything to tell us. And so their women are free and the Muslim women are slaves. That's the natural order of things. The women shouldn't be free. And many women Muslim women would be the first to tell you this. And a Muslim woman like Ilhan Omar or Linda Sarsour wearing the hijab, they're doing it for to gain political status in the game of identity politics in the United States. But at the same time, they say it's their right and it's their privilege for modesty and so on. And this is what they're told. This is what they grew up hearing. And the only other voices are voices they don't trust or like because they're not Muslims. So it's very easy for Muslim women to fall into this way of thinking because it's what they're taught from the beginning. And so the first thing you have to do is challenge here again, just like with the jihadis, challenge the truth of the belief system, not on the basis of some kind of universal understanding of women's rights because they don't believe in that, but on the basis that Muhammad's not really a prophet. He may not even have existed. The Quran is this hodgepodge of nonsense. It's not really a holy book. And then you can deal with women's rights.
I may just add here, there were several Muslim women who have embraced Hinduism and other faiths, and they are on Twitter and social media evoking and inspiring us to act.
Excellent.
And I would say that to us, a call is that let's embrace them. I mean, let's encourage them. And instead
yes,
of
I have interviewed quite a few of them.
we have both done this. Yes, we have both done it. Yeah, that's right. Next question. Run a day, Robert G., who circumcised the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and will Muslims get their foreskin back on the judgment day? Oh God, I mean, I don't know if you want to address that question.
I don't know. I don't know what to say about this. There may be a hadith about that. I don't remember, tell you the truth, offhand. That's never been an object of great concern for me, I must admit. In any case, this is just something that is done. Muslims do because this is commanded. It's just like everything else. And there is no idea in Islam of something being done because it's right, because it conforms to the natural order of things or something like that. Islam is entirely religion of command. Everything Muslims do, they do because Allah said to do it. Why? Don't ask. We don't know. But
oh yes, there is this the Quranic ayah 16.101 that says that if you ask questions, you become a kafir.
Yeah, that's right. There's 5.101 that says the same thing. That chapter 5.101 says that exactly that. O you who believe, do not ask about things which, if they were made known to you, would trouble you. But if you ask about them while the Quran is being revealed, which of course nobody can do that now, they will be made known to you. Allah forgives this, for Allah is forgiving, merciful. But people before you asked and then became unbelievers. So the whole idea of critical inquiry is discouraged, absolutely.
Yes, that the 16.101 is almost identical. So both are 101. Remember, 1 not 1. Okay? Next. Ajay, why did it take the West to recognize Islamic Jihad only after 9/11 and not learn from what India faced in the last 1400 plus years, as India was calling it from rooftops for years? I should say centuries.
Centuries,
yes.
Right.
But the West doesn't value history. Nobody knows history in the West. I wrote the history of jihad, and it includes the jihad against India. This was the first narrative history of jihad in the West to include, published in the West, to include the story of the jihad against India. Most Americans have no idea any of that happened. And most the popular histories of jihad that have been published even since 9/11 did not include the jihad against India. Mine was the first to do so. So why did the West discover jihad only after 9/11? The West has no historical memory. You ask the average person on the street in New York or Paris or London anything about jihad, they won't know, even now. And if they do know, it'll be an interior spiritual struggle for the betterment of the soul.
Saurav Kulkarni, Robert Spencer, is Republican Party aware of / against the jihadis? And Robert, if you feel threatened by jihadis, chant Hanuman Chalisa.
Thank you. Is the Republican Party aware of and against the jihadis? There are some Republicans who are, but generally the Republican Party is almost as useless as the Democrat Party. The Republicans generally favor the same idea that Islam is peace. After all, George W. Bush was a Republican, and he's the first one who said this on a grand scale, Islam is peace. And it became the essentially the policy of the Republican Party. Back in 2007, which is now 15 years ago, I debated Dinesh D'Souza in Washington at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. Now, the Conservative Political Action Conference is Republicans, but Dinesh D'Souza represented the mainstream view among them that Islam is peace. I was trying to argue the opposite. I believe there are portions of that debate that are still available on YouTube. But in any case, that's still the dominant view of the Republican Party. I was the outlier. As a matter of fact, they actually had the debate. The CPAC organizers, I found out later, had the debate in order to discredit the point of view that I represented, because they wanted to make sure that all the Republicans thought that Islam was peace. It didn't quite work so well for Dinesh, but in any case, that's just me saying you can judge for yourself. And the biggest problem that we have is that there's no significant political group that speaks about this problem realistically.
Next. Ajay, with the perpetual assertions by Islam across the globe over the centuries, why is the West still oblivious to the fact that it is the greatest danger to humanity and world order, and why does West still give shoulder to Islamophobia?
It's all the left. It's all because of the left and the left's hegemony. And the left, like Islam, they're both authoritarian. They both want to establish an authoritarian polity, and consequently they see each other as allies, and they have done this to the United States and the whole world and made people think that jihad is not the problem, Islamophobia is the problem.
Next.
Tanmay Pandey, can we not force our government to describe all forms of jihad and their consequences in long run for Hindus and nations? The local leaders should take charge to make everywhere aware of it.
Sure. One thing we must do in all countries is not support candidates at any level who do not demonstrate an awareness of this issue. But most people aren't even interested in doing that because they themselves don't have an awareness of this issue.
Next. Sudarshan, please invite Dr. Shatavadhani Ganesh from Bangalore. Sandeep Balakrishna knows him very well. The talk of the tribe of Shivaram and Krishna in shaping the Indic values and philosophical framework will be very useful for Hindus all across the country. Thank you, Sudarshan. I have approached him. Let's see. Next.
Sudarshan again. Can I translate Robert Spencer's The Lady's Guide to Quran into Kannada, please?
I don't know this book, The Lady's Guide to Quran. That's a very interesting title. I've written such a book. Maybe I'll have to.
Maybe I will add on, Sanjay ji has not said anything, but I will say that to be translating into Hindu in Hindi language, I think Jaipur Dialogue will collaborate with you to do that.
That would be wonderful. I'd be very honored to.
Yes, Hindi we can do any
Yes.
day.
Great.
It's not a problem.
Well, we can discuss that. The publisher of the book in the United States, Bombardier Books, they own the foreign rights, so we have to deal with them, and that's where it gets complex.
I know. Next. Poonam Abi, the halal certification fees all over the world, is there jizya?
Yep.
Yes, it is. I guess that's an observation, so we just go with it.
Yes. Hindu Communalist. Is there Kindle version of your book? Number 2, as the states incentivize being a Muslim through reservations, etc., what motivation do Muslims have to leave Islam?
I'm happy to say there is a Kindle edition of the book, The Critical Quran. I just saw it yesterday. It was just completed. It's beautiful. I'm very happy to say that it's even better than the print edition because of the way it's set up. But in any case, it is not yet available, but it will be available very soon. And as long as governments are incentivizing Islam, then what motivation do Muslims have to leave? Well, none, of course, and they are incentivizing it. And so they are the primary problem. What we need is a massive change in the governing classes. And maybe the next election will bring that. We'll see.
Well, just a correction. There's no reservation as such, but of course there are incentives.
Yes.
Next question. Shajar Safaya, same jihadi ideology cut my community into pieces in Kashmir. Obviously, Islam means peace, spelled P-I-E-C-E.
Quite right.
Intellectually confused. I love your name. How was Dawa movement impacted in U.S. culture? How has Dawa movement impacted in U.S. culture?
What here again, it's all because of the left, but Dawa is acceptable in American culture in a way that proselytizing for any other religion, including Christianity, is not. So I frequently see in American newspapers stories about Islam and about how Muslims understand this or that, how Muslim wisdom is useful to understand some issue or problem. You never see what Christianity thinks about this or that in American papers. And this is all, of course, bought and paid for and allowed by the leftists who run these papers.
Praveen Yara, how did the Christianity spread across the world through peace, wiping out Europe, North, South America, Australia, African civilization, killing crows? I think I'll pass this to take the next one. Next one, please. Chaser.
Is Critical Quran available in any Indian language? Not as yet. Not as yet.
But not yet, but I hope it will be.
In Yemen, most Muslims are fanatic. Why fear? Leaders have to take strong decisions, even end career, collateral damage for better future. I saw a video of Muslim doing namaz during daytime square. Will continue.
Well, it will continue, and there'll be more of it, as we said before. And if most Muslims are fanatical, it's because the Quran teaches this. It's interesting. People speak in the United States very often about radical Islam. And they say they're opposed to radical Islam, as if there is a benign Islam that is not radical. That
well said.
But the problem is that if you read the Quran and it says, kill them wherever you find them, and when you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks, and on and on and on, that's radical. So the radical Islam is actually mainstream. We can be glad that there are some Muslims who are not radical, but they are not following what the book dictates.
Right. Okay.
Due to Robert's
your book is pre-ordered for rupees 12,588 in India. Nobody's going to buy it.
I have no control over the pricing. I'm sorry. And anything that has to be imported nowadays also, both ways, it's extraordinarily expensive. And all this has to do with the rapidly rising inflation in the United States. And everything that comes with it. And so I apologize for that, but that is something that is completely outside of my purview. In the contract that I sign for every book, it says that the publisher sets the prices, and the publisher sets the prices based on various considerations with no input from the author.
Okay, so then for translation, we'll charge them a hefty sum.
Ratnadeep Ambilwade. Due to Robert, sir, I left my secular ideology and turned towards reading about my Hindu dharma. Question: why world leaders don't go to the root cause of Islamic terror, that is the sky book?
Because they're constantly told that the root cause of Islamic terror is not the sky book, but something else. They're always told, for example, that it's poverty. And what that means for the United States is that the United States has to pay money to Afghanistan or Pakistan or various other jihadi entities, and that this will supposedly solve the problem. They're being lied to, in other words, and they believe it.
Sharwin Shelke, how do you counter this ideology? By secularism or by being extremist of your own? So he's given a binary solution.
Not by either one, but by being who we are, by being unapologetically who we are, by uniting despite our own differences because we face a common foe, by being realistic about that foe, by being consistent and courageous. These are the ways that we're going to overcome this. Obviously, secularism has no force to deal with this and is collapsing all over the world, really. You can look at what's happening in Turkey, for example, also all over Europe, and certainly by an extremist ideology of your own. Well, then why bother? If it's just violence against violence and dog eat dog, then how are you any different from them?
I have one suggestion to make, and that is something like demanding reciprocity. If there are so many Islamic centers brought about in the West and other places to teach us about the beauty of Islam, it's time for us to demand opening similar centers in Islamic
countries.
countries.
To questions, otherwise we'll spend another hour here.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Then I was just saying that.
Far too many questions.
Yes, okay. Robert, seems that US politicians were first bought over by the Chinese prices and subsequently by the Middle East oil money, and it makes the whole world think that that's in the land of values and freedom. Isn't that a scam?
Yes. Yes, it is. Look, I'm an American. I was brought up being very proud of being an American, the land of the free and the home of the brave. That's all gone. We are being ruled by a corrupt and traitorous political class that is intentionally imposing policies that are not in the best interests of Americans or of the world at large. And unless and until this class is swept out utterly, maybe in 22, maybe in 24, but maybe never, then the United States is finished as a beacon of freedom.
Okay, next question is rather simple. Poonam Abhi, are Muslims doing what Allah said or what Muhammad said that Allah is saying?
Well, the only authority that we have in Islam for what Allah is saying is Muhammad. And Muhammad himself, if you read my book, Did Muhammad Exist?, may be a concoction that is more fiction, more legend than historical reality. But yes, even in the standard version of Islam, it all comes from Muhammad. It all comes, he says what Allah said. We don't have any idea. Allah's not thundering from the clouds so that everybody can hear.
Next.
Saunak Santra. On a lighter note, Robert, don't you receive threats on a daily basis for your work? Do stay safe. Your work is too valuable.
Yes, that's a very light note. I have received many threats, and there have been 2 attempts to kill me, and it's not as if I'm going to live forever. I'm not really worried about this. I can tell you that some years ago, I got a threat from someone. I got an email, and the email said, "I know where you live, and I followed you home from the supermarket. And next time I see you, I'm going to kill you." And so I went out and I said this to a friend who responded, "Oh, that's ridiculous. When were you last in the supermarket?" And,
Some look-alike will die.
not, but
Hope not. Hope not.
Nation first. Every human first learn about al-taqiyya. Those who are creating problems were converted 2-3 generations back. So if they don't want the same in future, conversions issue should be dealt nicely.
yes, well, that's true. Taqiyya is, in the first place, a Shiite doctrine, but it's common to Sunnis as well because it's based on chapter 3, verse 28 of the Quran, which allows for deception of unbelievers. And that deception, I think, we're seeing on a very grand scale nowadays. And people don't realize they're being deceived, especially Americans. Americans are extraordinarily naive and trusting as a people. And if you say that someone is deceiving, the Americans are likely to think that you're a bad person for not believing them. And this is something that I've encountered for decades now. That it reflects poorly on me because I say we can't trust these people. You're right. Conversion to Islam has consequences, and converts to Islam are often the most virulent jihadis because they, you grow up in a Muslim context, and in many cases, not always, but in many cases, you're not going to be waging jihad, and you don't see anybody around you doing it. And so you're just used to it being taught and being there in the Quran, but it's not a live thing. Whereas converts, they read the book for the first time and they see this is a primary duty they have. And so there's an extraordinarily high number of converts to Islam who get involved in jihad violence. And I track that at Jihad Watch regularly.
Yes, and of course, I guess a need for approval from the great Arabs. Prabhakar Saraswat, what was that question? We lost it. Okay, Rajiv Jaya, more US Republicans should be okay. Who's asking this question?
More US Republicans should be shown Kashmir files to be aware of jihad. Thanks to Ohio Republican Neeraj Antani for honoring cash files. Yes, that's right.
Next. Vijay M. Shouldn't we be worried about Arab investment in India? Is this sudden change in attitude about Islam by MBN? MBS actually, not MBN.
Yeah, I don't believe MBS. That's Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. He says he's reforming Islam, and then 81 people he executed not long ago. He had executed. He didn't do it himself. And many of them were executed for Islam-related crimes, such as apostasy, blasphemy, and so on. And he even defended this, saying the death penalty is in the Quran. We can't change it. Well, there's plenty of things that are in the Quran, and if he thinks he can't change it, then there's not going to be any meaningful reform. And yes, you should be worried about Arab investment in India.
Okay. It isn't too much anyway.
Yeah. Jahangir Gotla, can we advocate kafirophobia?
The problem is this is not a fair fight. This is not an even playing field. And so, yes, we should try to, like I said before, call attention to their hypocrisy. But we are not going to get the same treatment because this is not really about equal rights for everyone or everything that the left says. This is about the advantages of their protected groups, and we're not one of them.
Nishikant Reddy, why don't the security agencies across West and India read the philosophies taught in madrasas that can be a threat to nation security? Well, I have been trying to teach them. Nobody listens. And Pakistanis have written a book. They call it a Quranic concept of war. And I found out from my military institutions that they don't teach it in India. Come on.
They should teach it. It's endorsed by Zia ul Haq. You can't get higher authority than that. And so it's astonishing, really. But it's the same kind of denial that we were talking about. It's all over the world. Everyone thinks Islam doesn't have anything to do with terrorism, and they will not examine the data that shows otherwise.
Next question. Ajendra Chaurasia. A Maulana told jizya was taken 1.5%. What's the truth?
The truth is that jizya, it varies, but it's onerous. It's not 1.5%. I'll tell you why. Here's the proof. Zakat, the obligatory alms that the Muslims have to pay, is 2.5%. Now, human nature being what it is, people don't like to pay taxes. Not in America, not in India, nowhere. But taxes are an unavoidable part of life. Now, if the tax for the non-Muslims was lower than the tax for Muslims, there would be many Muslims converting to other religions. So they would pay the lower rate. Did we ever see that in 1400 years of Islamic history? We did not. And that is proof in itself that the jizya was never 1.5%. It was always more than 2.5%. Because what we did see were millions of infidels converting to Islam to pay the lower tax. To the extent that in various places at various times, as I show in the history of Jihad, the conversions had to be forbidden because it was destroying the tax base. The non-Muslims had to be forbidden to convert to Islam so that they would keep paying the taxes.
Next. Priyank Bharadwaj, though 9/11 was committed by Islamic terrorists, majority of Muslims don't condemn the same. Why West is too much inclined towards concept of Islamophobia?
The left works all on victimhood. If you're a victim, then you get special privileges. So if you can claim that you are the victim of systematic discrimination and harassment, then you are in line to be one of the protected classes of the left. And so the Muslims played this game. They invented this concept of Islamophobia, and they put it over so that they become one of the victimhood groups, and now they have the special accommodations. It was very cleverly done.
Prabhakar Saraswat. Impose jizya tax on every US citizen so they can read and understand Holy Quran very quickly.
Don't give Joe Biden any ideas. I'm sure
Next.
he'll give us more tax.
Okay, Mahesh Madhur. Thank you very much, Mahesh. Thank you for this wonderful support. Thank you.
Intellectually confused. Religion were created to control people.
Anyway, that's a remark. I think we can leave it at that.
I leave it at that.
Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of this wonderful session, and we had almost 50 questions. And thank you, Robert, for taking them up so patiently and so beautifully. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Vibhuti, and thank you, all viewers.
Thank you.
And signing off from here. Good night from here, and good day to both of you.
Yes, good night and good day to all of us. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.